So I think we can get started now with the presentation. We'll go through some of the things that I think you'll find interesting about VR and a sanity check on why and how you should use it in training and learning. So the title of this is the 13 reasons why VR learning isn't what you need next, and why VR ready is the real trend you need to be looking at. So it's a bit of a contentious title. You might think that I'm anti-VR, but that's absolutely not the case. My name's Danny Stefanic, and I'm the CEO of LearnBright, but run a bunch of companies around VR and 3D and have done for the last 25 years. So I'm a big advocate of VR and started the International Virtual Reality Association back in 1994, so a little while ago. So my key point is VR is good. Let's get that very clear. So VR is really good for engagement and attention in learning and training. And in the context of serious games, it's a real step up in the immersion and the retention and engagement there. Training things like failure in safety, making bad choices in a safe environment, learning from those choices, and being able to operate in impossible, impractical, or even hazardous environments. That could be working on nuclear facilities or even going back in time. So that makes it a unbelievable context for learning and training. It's great for performing motor memory tasks as well, where you might be working in a physical manner, and that's really terrific as well. Incredible data for performance assessment. We used to, if somebody started a course, if it's in progress or whether they've completed as being our main core data points, but this offers a way lot more. So VR is good. We know that. And VR has been through a few waves of what we'd call growth, and the most recent one has seen a great lot of success. But as I said, back in the 90s, I was also working with VR, and it was very hot back then as well. But now it's here to stay. It's a part of some very interesting ecosystems. And it's growing bigger and bigger. And what we're finding, though, is people are fixated on VR and not getting a clear picture of the objectives and applications of learning and training. So a few of the authors are really reaching the maximum audience, and this has got to do with learning objectives. You start with your learning objectives, then figure out how can you get them to your audience. And most of the things we're seeing in VR are VR only. You need to have a headset, you need to have all the equipment, and the experience only works in that environment. And that's what I define the VR chasm. And I'll just quote it right here for you, is the gap between solution value, that is like the learning objectives, that requires a specific set of VR equipment and the audience wanting to engage with that value. So over one side, you have the learning objectives and the desire to train something. The other side, you've got the VR equipment and the experience that's been built. And you've got to get as much of the audience across to that experience as possible. And there's a chasm there. And I define the solutions that bridge that gap, the chasm, as VR ready. And we'll be seeing more about that as we go through the presentation. So a VR ready solution focuses on the key value an experience provides and looks to maximize access across varying devices and audiences. VR only solutions tend toward being only available in one particular VR hardware suite. It might be developed just for the Oculus Rift, just for the Vive. Maybe it's something that only works in a 360-degree headset or a Google Cardboard, but rarely anything that continues across all of them. And being VR ready means being platform agnostic and having an experience work on any device. Doesn't matter what the user has access to, whether it's a smartphone, a tablet, a laptop, desktop, or in any of the VR or AR equipment. And that really expands your audience. And that's what we mean by VR ready. So again, if you haven't already jumped in, please do go to that URL in a new tab. This is actually being simulcast, streamed into that 3D environment as well. You'll be in a VR auditorium with other avatars. You can wave and say hello and have a fun experience. in there at the same time, which is the point. You can jump straight in right now. Doesn't matter if you're on a laptop, a smartphone, or any device, or in VR, and you can access it and be there with other people socially right now. And that means accessible to 100% of audience. So next we'll get into the actual 13 reasons why, and this is more of a clarification why VR-only learning isn't what you need next. And that is a pretty easy thing to come up with. I could have gone way past 13, but I think the 13 top ones are the ones we'll cover. So reason number one, do you have too many heads at your school or not enough headsets? So the things we have to consider are how many headsets does your audience have? I've talked to a few schools who have actually purchased en masse virtual reality devices. And when I say en masse, maybe 20 or 30 devices, but that's pretty rare. Do you have to buy new hardware to engage in the experience? Where is the audience located? Are they distributed, perhaps over different campuses or different faculties? And do you have to ship headsets around from one place to the other? Is that something you need to do? And how many users do you need to get through that experience? So you can have, let's say, a classroom with one virtual reality headset, but all the students have to get a chance of going through that experience. So that's one of the restrictions for VR only. If it demands having a headset, then you've got to have enough of those devices to begin with to get enough audience through to get those learning objectives across. Pretty simple. So reason number two is, does your audience have adequate equipment? Now, I'm not just talking about VR headsets here. If we're talking about a room-based VR experience where you can walk around, let's say in a 3x3 meter or 6-foot kind of space, you'll need high-performance computers and with good graphics capabilities to run that. And most organizations have been moving more towards mobility, so having laptops that you can carry with you easily. And most laptops can't run VR typically. They're not upgradable either, so you can't just plug in the latest graphics card. And the new laptops that do support VR are pretty costly, heavy, pretty noisy. I'm running one now and the fans are just spinning away nice and loudly. And of course that makes them less portable and less battery life. So that's restrictive. And if you're using the headsets that put a VR phone in them, well, you're going to have to have those mobile phones that are capable of performing VR well. So maybe the latest Samsung phones or a Google Pixel. Getting a bunch of those is also cost inhibitive. But even if you go for the low-end cardboard experiences, you can use them on most phones, but you'll have a subpar experience, something that is not good for your users to think of VR as something that they really enjoyed. So you've got to be careful of delivering a subpar experience. And VR-only experiences, they tend to be pretty bulky and resource hungry. So that means they'll use a lot of the CPU's, PC's resources, but also be huge in file size and download. We're talking gigabytes per experience to download. When you're used to downloading web pages and integrating with, watching videos off YouTube, it's all pretty seamless and you don't need all the storage capacity on the machine. But with the VR experiences, you need to be able to install these massive packages. And if you put enough on there, you run out of space eventually. So the key to the VR readiness is also progressive enhancement. Again, being able to go across all these different devices and give a better and better experience as you go through and up to the better available equipment. Reason number three, people have trouble setting up DVRs, let alone VR systems. Now, I'll just tell you a little story here. We have a VR arcade that we take to organizations and we show them the capabilities of all sorts of equipment and VR devices. And I can't count the number of times that we've had setup issues. And that could be anything from software updates on Samsung or Oculus, vendor updates, and setting up the virtual boundaries, the place where people can walk around, scanning the environments in AR. All these things need to happen prior to somebody coming in and starting to see the value of the equipment. So if we only had that single way to show people the value of what the experiences we create are, then, and something didn't go as planned, that's it, it's over. But being able to pull out a tablet or show on just a flat phone or just on a laptop what the learning objectives are and how the 3D environment works, you still have that fallback. You still have that progressive continuum to show the value. It doesn't rely on VR only. So setting up can be a real hassle. And some people have permanent rooms to kind of solve that issue as well. Reason number 4, departments, IT departments, responsible for keeping things off your computer and keeping nasties out. So usually there's processes and procedures at most organizations that they try and stop that. And VR usually requires custom installation of software and experiences, even just the experiences. And that is another roadblock to getting things within the hands of teachers and students. So as I said, some have a dedicated room for VR. In organizations where they're concerned about security and privacy, often those VR systems are just standalone. They have no access to the rest of the school or organization's network. And that restricts your capabilities, like tying into a learning management system, for instance, to track what's been completed by students or staff. So that's a very important point. And of course, if you deliver in a VR ready scenario, which is typically through browsers and internet capabilities, then as long as your platform allows web access, then you've got access to those capabilities as well. So number 5, the reasons why VR only is difficult. There is a number of experiences you can get out there, but to get to them is also a bit of a nightmare. So there are lots of apps out there, like app stores. There's 2.8 million apps, but equally there's walled gardens where you get your apps for different devices. So you have Steam VR, you have Google Daydream Store where you get things for its device. Windows Mixed Reality has its own store as well where you can install apps from. Sony has its ecosystem where you get applications from. So each of those is a walled garden itself. And that adds to a whole plethora of other issues, needing accounts on those systems, not wanting students to necessarily access those accounts when they're in the devices, a plethora of issues that come from having to be locked into those app stores. And the inflexibility of being able to control that. And of course, with VR Ready, you don't have to worry about that. It's all web-based, so anything you're using to control access to content in an educational environment applies directly to the VR Ready metaphor as well, because you can block content within the browser, but also get access to experiences just by going to URLs, which is a very, very easy process rather than having to install things or have an account on a particular system. Number 6, Trojan horse or hole in your defenses. We're talking about data privacy and security here. If you've ever installed apps, there's a great quote in here where is it? Yeah, why does a calculator app need to know my location? Why, really? So you know, when you install apps, they ask for all sorts of permissions. They want to see your contact lists on your phone and access to your media and files. It doesn't make a lot of sense. When you're using the web browser, though, you don't need to give all those permissions. And so the same security that web has been pushing for years and years and years, which is definitely one of the strongest secure platforms compared to custom-built ecosystems and platforms by organizations like the stores that we're talking about. It means that you've got really strong defenses using web as a VR-ready solution. So do consider what data is being collected, recorded, and shared by VR apps. We all know about the GDPR recent privacy rules in Europe and how that applies globally, not just in Europe. Is content being uploaded into the apps that must stay within your organization? Are you releasing personally identifiable information outside your educational institution? You really want to be concerned about that. And do you really want to be uploading 360 videos of your internal facilities on YouTube or Facebook? Is that something that really you should be doing. So consider those as well. Again, if you're not in the VR environment, I notice a few more people have joined us here. So if you're not, please visit this URL, learnbyte.com/join-villi, and you'll be able to jump into the auditorium, the 3D auditorium, where there's a number of other people present. Click on the blue markers to move around, grab a seat down the front, and it's a great way to listen to my presentation also. And we're streaming the slides and this whole webinar actually into that meeting space as well. So you check it out. So we'll continue with the 13 reasons why now. And we're up to number 7, not excluding remote users. I'm not sure how many of you in your educational experiences have been teaching people remotely. Definitely huge in the business environment. Distance learning is obviously an old topic, but remote work is increasing more and more and more as well. And VR enables a lovely addition to making that much less isolating and really bringing people closer together in these shared experiences. So it's an exciting thing. But we don't expect all users to be in the same location as the VR hardware. So this is where, again, VR only would mean everyone needs the equipment. So you either bring everyone to a meeting room or a facility to be able to use the equipment, or you send the equipment out. But being VR ready, meaning that they can use any device to experience it. They might only have a smartphone or a tablet or a laptop to begin with, and next year they might get a VR headset, but that's no reason to exclude them from a social VR experience and access to that sort of engagement, even though it's not necessarily fully immersive. So there's this progressive enhancement with levels of immersion. And that way you can include as many people as you can into the experience that are remote. And as you get more equipment available or budget available, or people buy their own individual devices, then you'll essentially have more and more people getting into it without restricting it to get to that point for delivering your learning objectives. So this is a really cool reason why being VR ready and delivering via web is way better than VR only. So number 8, single sign-on, or something we're working on called universal avatars. So in most of the ecosystems, you end up with an account, like you do with app stores, but you also end up with an avatar, a representation that you choose, and these avatars are being stored within those platforms. So if it's Facebook or Oculus with their Oculus avatars, whether it's Microsoft who are doing things with holoportation, which is interesting, but also some avatar examples like their Xbox avatars will be finding their way into VR and AR environments. Google have been doing some ability to watch YouTube together with little avatars as well, and even Magic Leap recently announced their avatar system. Each of them are maintaining the avatars within their walled garden. And you probably want to have an avatar system where you have more control for your audience rather than somebody else deciding that. And things to consider, depending on how you operate, outfits and the qualities that you want that fit the organization's policy. So that could be clothing, it could be anything that really you do or don't want people to be able to wear in a shared social context in VR. Inappropriate actions by users, what can the avatars do? What actions can they take that might be unsatisfactory? And access to learning and training with their own avatar or another from an external sign-up process. So we're working on a thing called universal avatars that allows you to set which kind of outfits people can wear, how their identity is defined and stored, and that gives you real power over the way people can be presented, what they can do, and where the data is stored. Also, if you want to launch, and the Villi MOOC is a great example of this, the experience of going to the auditorium is actually embedded as an activity inside the MOOC itself. And that activity is what's called a SCORM module, or a course that typically sits in a learning management system. And just by uploading that module into the learning management system, it comes with the ability to dynamically create a character with the identity of the user from the LMS, the learning management system. But then where it's used, the avatar is obfuscated. So there's nothing but a unique ID that doesn't link to the original user, and so there's no way of that privacy data leaking. But on top of that, you can get score data from doing things. Let's say we're in the auditorium at the moment. It could be maybe you've gone to a seat and sat down, maybe you've used your laser pointer, maybe you've talked to a bot, and these are all tasks or quests you need to complete in that environment. They can all be scored and sent back through that score module into the learning management system as well. All seamlessly, you don't have to do anything. All you do is deploy the course in your learning management system, and that the rest is taken care of. So really a nice way to go. And other standards like learning tools interoperability and XAPI, those can be used in this context. But look at any of the other platforms, Facebook, Microsoft, YouTube, and Magic Leap, and others. You can't do that. You don't have the control over that system because it's not web-based. And also that last one, which is really interesting, avatars restricted to an organization's domain. So can you say only avatars that come from this domain are allowed in, which can be a very powerful mechanism for keeping the right people in and the right people out. So number 9, room to move. We have organizations who have enough trouble booking a meeting room in their organization. I'm talking global organizations with lots of facilities and headquarters and buildings, but still having trouble finding a meeting room to book. You need enough room to move around. And if you're in an existing room, you probably have to move the furniture out the way for room scale VR. And if it's not a space that's permanently set up for VR, you have to move all the furniture back and out again. Room to move can be a real restrictor. So even for the mobile and standalone headsets, you need to consider if they're sitting down, they've got enough room to spin around 360 degrees. And if you have a dedicated space, well, if people aren't using the VR equipment at any time, that space is lost as well. So the idea of VR readiness, again, means any device. If you want, you can use a tablet or a laptop. And if you don't have the space, you can still engage in the same learning objectives and then move up to using VR as you need. So yet another reason why having that continuum can win when you're restricted on space. Number 10, some of us might be familiar with this already, simulator sickness, or reverse car sickness, if you like. You're sitting still and everything's moving around you. Guido Helmhorst of KLM Airlines, they've done some interesting things with VR. And he said it really well in the Training Industry magazine recently. He said it is really a make it or break it experience. Once the trainee removes the headset out of frustration or nausea, you'll have a hard time convincing them to put the goggles back on. So VR is new for people. If they have a bad experience, they're not really keen to repeat it. So you have one chance and one chance only to make sure that they don't have a bad experience. So VR only forces a person to go into that VR experience. If you've lost that person, you've lost them completely if the only deliverable mechanism was VR. And you can deal with this in a number of ways, limiting movements that are in contradiction to what the person is seeing. Teleporting is a great way. Instead of moving people, flying or walking them through an environment, just jump them from place to place. That works a lot better to reduce nausea. And also matching things to their physical dimensions if they're moving around in a room space. That helps as well. But of course, if they just don't like it, I remember back in the 90s, I was demonstrating virtual reality headsets at trade shows. And a lady came up to me and had the headset, rather big headset at that time. And I said, well, here's the VR headset, you can have a go. And she said, I can't put that on. I said, well, why not? She said, it's going to mess up my hair. Said, that's fair enough, that's reasonable. It will. So that was a no. So you can, if you can use a tablet, a phone, a laptop or desktop and show the same learning objectives in 3D for those that can't or won't use VR, then you can continue to get value out of those learning objectives. Number 11, vendor lock-in. I'm sure we're all familiar with this, taking on a technology and then being stuck with whoever provided it forever, and maybe not getting the support or the updates that you're looking for. So we know the VR market is still relatively small. Choosing a headset will also determine what tracking and hand controllers use, and also to which content you have access to, and may determine the content you can produce yourself. If you are creating content, consider web-based VR-ready solutions. They can work across everything, so you can swap out hardware and solutions at any time. In fact, the VR auditorium we're in, a person can attend on a flat screen using a phone, tablet, laptop, but they could use something from the Google Daydream devices, so a Pixel phone in a Google View headset or a Lenovo Mirage Solo. They can also join using Windows mixed reality headsets like the Samsung Odyssey, or they can even join using the Microsoft HoloLens and the Magic Leap 1, and of course a Vive or a Rift as well. So it doesn't matter what device you're using, because they all have some access to browsers, you can get people into the same environment across all of those different devices, and more to come. So this is a really wonderful thing, and also it's wonderful that each of these companies is working to make things web compatible. We could only do it if they had some initiatives, some real commitment internally to make that happen, and that's really what's allowing this. So hats off to them for making that extra effort. But it really gives you the opportunity to build something once and deploy it across all of the devices without having to compile or build an application or deploy it in an app store. It's very, very important aspects. So number 12. I mentioned a little bit about this earlier, which is storing scores or being compatible with learning management systems. And of course, it'd be great if you could take the learning objectives and the data of people taking action within VR and have that recorded in your existing tracking systems that you use in your organization. Something that tracks your student scores or activity, and have it ready there automatically. They follow a few quests in the experience, they complete them, or they get certain scores, and that all gets pushed into the learning management system automatically. That's a beautiful solution and something that can work with existing deployments. So that's the web is the best platform for that. If you're using all these web technologies, being able to pull them in together and integrate them into your VR experience and call out to them is a super powerful thing. Most of the VR applications we see are written in game engines, Unity or Unreal, and they rarely can or do integrate with web systems. And as we've seen, at least in the e-learning industry over the last decade or more, with serious games, there's been some amazing serious games written and designed by e-learning companies and research grants in universities and schools. But most of them suffer from the fact that they need programmers to make changes to them. And a lot of them assume that they're used for, let's say, a year, and they've had massive funding injected into them. Programmers have spent lots of hours building something to specifications. But then a year later, the requirements have maybe shifted a little bit, the curriculum has shifted a tiny bit, and the serious game is no longer appropriate. You need to ask for changes to be made. Again, you have to go and find programmers again, hopefully the same ones are available, and then make changes. So a lot of serious games, although incredibly amazing, gather dust or are in legacy formats, probably in Flash or Unity or Unreal, and the staff that have access to the games aren't able to make quick and easy changes. The power of the web is that you can make changes to things. You can get in there and start to see how it's written, the code. You can make changes. You can find a lot more web developers out there than you can games programmers. So it opens it up to a much, much wider audience for VR-ready creation. So yeah, consider how you can leverage your existing systems in your organization and by that create a better outcome for users by integrating them. And specifically storing scores in the LMS should be a no-brainer, but not many VR applications offer that capability. So finally, reason number 13. What's the true return on investment for VR? What we want to see is you purchase the VR equipment and you can justify the outcome. You say, well, we did this, we've got the VR equipment, we've done the training, and we're seeing this real benefit here. This is why we can justify investing in it year on year on year. So organizations are buying a few headsets to experiment with. I'm yet to run into procurement departments that have approved headsets for a whole division. The most I've seen is a few universities and schools with maybe 30 to 40 headsets maximum, and they're only recent, very recent. And to give an idea of budgets to build content, and I read through the MOOC forums here, I saw a lot of people talking about the struggle of budget for using VR in schools and education. So that doesn't need to be a restriction with VR readiness. You can deliver learning objectives that are fun and engaging across all devices. But to give you an idea of what it costs to build a game, building a serious game can cost you around $200,000. And for a basic VR learning or training experience in Unity Unreal can cost upwards of $50,000. And once you start talking about adding social VR or collaboration and multi-user learning experiences to the VR, the costs go up significantly. But with VR readiness, that's not the case. You can build pretty cheaply VR experiences that work in web browsers. You don't need to buy the VR equipment yet. Or if you have one headset, you can test experience or give it to students to have a go at it one at a time, but they can continue their experience on a flat screen device. They can have a progressive experience across different devices. And that really allows you to get the learning objectives spread out over a maximum audience, which can give you the return on investment. Now, most learning objectives aren't VR only. They're capable of being used in a VR ready situation. There are a few learning objectives that only work in VR. That might be learning to drive a crane or motor memory skills on a production line, things that really require that intimate physical relationship and that skill that you're building through physical movement. But the rest, most learning objectives that we've dealt with over the years are capable of being delivered on a flat screen as well. It gets better when you're in VR because you're excluding all the other distractions, 100% attention, and because it's life size, you're getting better engagement in memory and retention of that experience. But other than that, the learning objectives can still be delivered in a VR ready context. So that's how you get your return on investment and justify to all stakeholders how and why you can start to dip your toe into VR, not at high cost, but incrementally. And if you can show the value out of an experience, even on flat screens, that can justify why the VR experience will be even better. You can start to increase slowly get VR devices into your organization as well. So they're the top 13 reasons. As I said, there's a lot more, but I think I've probably harped on a few points repeatedly, and hopefully that's given you some context for why VR only learning isn't what you need next, but VR ready learning is really what you should be looking at. So thank you for listening. Any questions, I'd be welcome in the webinar chat, not in the 3D auditorium because I'm having trouble being in two places at once, but in the chat in the Quick Meeting webinar. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. And also, there is a link for you to start a free trial with our VR Ready platform if you go to learnbyte.com/Billy. And for each of you here, if you would like, I'm happy to give you a 45-minute one-on-one tour of our VR campus. And in that, we can talk about educational discounts, sponsorship, as we've sponsored our VR auditorium here for VR MOOC, and anything else you might have on your mind. We're really keen to help educators start to roll out VR, and we need that easy on-ramp of VR readiness, not the sudden jump into VR only. So thank you very much for listening, but please, any questions you have, I'd love to hear them. There must be one or two, I'm sure. I have 25 years of experience in VR. Even if it's not related to this talk, please feel free to ask. Yes, you'll have access to the slides. Yeah, absolutely. Do you think VR usage is more appropriate for younger people and teenagers or for all? That's a good question. So our platform that we've been deploying has been deployed in schools, universities, and large commercial organizations as well. So the audience has been wide ranging, from kids to teenagers to students, and also senior managers in organizations. We're talking 60-year-old plus people with that are not that tech savvy getting into our platform and using it. So you need to build an experience that is accessible to everyone. One of the things you'll notice if you're in the 3D auditorium is that we use these hotspots or markers for people to jump around. So it's point and click. On a flat phone or a tablet device, you can just tap, and go to that location with your avatar. So if you're talking about VR only, where they wear a headset, then I think it is restrictive to all audiences because the session times are usually restricted to half an hour maximum before people get uncomfortable in the devices. If you're talking about your VR learning objectives being delivered across all devices, then it's appropriate for all ages. Getting the nice kind of model we have for navigating in our environments has been a 3-year process of exposure to real learners across the whole spectrum. As I said, from older managers all the way down to kids, and this simple point and click navigation metaphor has been the best. So the middle ground to getting people able to use it easily. So that has been a challenge, but something that we believe we've solved. Thanks for the question, Janet. I might add that using that free trial we offer, you can build your own meeting rooms and build experiences with bots that you can have conversations with, add furniture, move it around, all within the browser. It's pretty simple, and I think this is really where VR is headed. That it's as easy as setting up a blog post to be able to create a VR environment. In fact, our focus has been on anyone who can create a PowerPoint should be able to create a VR experience. So that's really been the focus. Good question about, we're all familiar, well, maybe we're not all familiar, but the history of using Second Life for meetings and engagement. Second Life really successfully got traction and got everyone excited. But as soon as you tried to deploy it in an educational environment or an enterprise environment, hello firewalls, hello the problems of having to install an app and getting permission to do so, and having a computer fast enough or more powerful enough to run it. All those things were real restrictors. So one of the benefits of using web-based technology, again, is you can allow it to work through firewalls. So if you can click a link to watch a YouTube video, then you can use VR-ready capabilities as well. Some people are working on multi-user extensively. We have been for social VR, and we've created a number of fallbacks to allow you to access. Some firewalls, very restricted ones, can block you, but we've managed to make ways that falls back to be progressively accessible. So a lot more accessible than Second Life ever was for firewalls. Yeah, we've definitely got user experience is much more user friendly, and with most apps, you don't have as much control over setting up the user interface or elements of it. Again, something we're doing in our platform is allowing you to take control of that. So it's more of an authoring tool like PowerPoint or Google Slides to be able to have that power to control what you want it to look like. Whereas Second Life is really, here's the environment, it's made as a game. You have some control over changing it, but the user interface is the way that it is. And you had a little ability to modify that. So this new mechanism really gives the control to the authors. So I encourage you to try it out. I think you'll find it fun. And if you're in the VR auditorium at the moment, you'll notice there's a giant VR headset in the middle of the scene. We can actually add new items to the environment, move them around. It's all real time. You can add websites and pin them into the environment as well, just by adding them to the chat bar. You can pin them and store them in that space permanently. Add bots, furniture, and of course, 3D assets from any of the open libraries. We have a library ourselves of furniture and room templates, but you can use things from Microsoft Remix 3D, Google Poly as a search engine, the SketchUp, Sketchfab, all these resources now, tens of thousands of free Creative Commons 3D content that you can use. We actually use that to build a language training experience called Lingoland. Actually, it's called Language Vacation now. Lingoland is already a trademark. But Language Vacation, where you go to an Italian village and you start talking to characters there and learning how to speak Italian. And that whole village came from a free asset on Sketchfab. We just added the bots on top and the hotspots and the conversations. And then we had a training experience in an Italian village, all built, in a day or two. So incredibly fun and great when such amazing resources are available to build training on top of. We'll just take one or two more questions, and then I think we can probably wrap it up. Well, the language training is just one example of our platform, and what I can do is actually, I can show you, definitely if you book a presentation with me, email danny@learnbright.com, I will definitely be able to show you these experiences. But what I can do is share the link to the Language Vacation here, and you can try it out. So there we go. That's a link to it, and you can load it in your browser and speak to the mentor, the guide. Then you can also go and learn how to shop, learn how to purchase things from a market, learn how to order at a restaurant. Really, really a great bit of fun. The great thing is you could author these yourself or take a project like this and modify it and create your variation on it and make that custom to your students. All the bots use text-to-speech, which is a web feature as well on most devices. And so all you do is change the text of what you want them to say, and in real time, they'll be able to speak it. So you don't need to worry about recording audio files or anything like that. And the bots animate while they're talking, so it's all automatic. These are some of the great things that we can do now in a web-based environment. So one more question, and I think then we'll wrap it up. Or if there's no more questions, I think we can probably wrap up the whole demo. Fantastic. Okay, we'll make sure the slides are available for you later on. You can drop into that 3D auditorium anytime you like. If you want to bring colleagues in to check it out, go for it. It's there, but there's a whole campus that I'd love to show you, multiple rooms, different ways that it's being used for training. Definitely email me, book in a time, and we can have a one-on-one little tour of the campus while we talk about its application to education. So feel free to do that. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you got a lot of value out of it, and I look forward to seeing you further in the MOOC, in the forums and other contexts where we might cross our paths. So thank you, everyone.